Welcome. My name is DK. I'm going to be your MC, originally from Pontypridd in South Wales. And it's good morning to most of you, which is, I understand, in Wales today. You find me in Te Whanganui o Tara, which is Wellington, the capital city of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Even though I'm a Welsh boy at heart, I'm actually a dual citizen. So you'll find me between the continents here. And I'm the one who's been producing this for Media Cymru. And this is going to be a specific focus on building out the media ecosystem, sharing back into Wales from New Zealand, which in my experience has a slightly more mature media ecosystem. And this was an attempt to just share some insights, some wisdom. And we've already had one session about the historical kind of nature of how New Zealand came to be such a rich and vibrant place, especially around TV and film. Today is all going to be about the gamers and the gaming industry. Our first of three speakers, and each of them are going to have 15 minutes just to give an overview of their pedigree, their insights, what they want to share with you in terms of learning. Our first speaker is Mario Wynands. And very briefly, Mario is one of the seasoned game leaders in New Zealand and, like I said, Wellington, Te Whanganui o Tara. Starting his business in 1997, is definitely one of the people who've been around the longest and the most successful, and he runs a company called PikPok, and I'm not going to steal his thunder because he's got a whole presentation on all this to really situate himself and the company and their achievements. So without further ado, diolch yn fawr, and thank you very much again, Mario, for your time this evening, and the digital stage is all yours.
Great, thank you very much for that that introduction. Definitely a pleasure to be invited and participating today, and hopefully some of what we have to share will be useful for the other participants on the call. Hopefully you can see the deck. I do have a few slides here. It will be a bit of a whirlwind tour, given we have about 15 minutes to get through quite a lot of material about PikPok, kind of what we're up to, and the wider New Zealand industry, sort of from my perspective. Starting off, who am I? I'm the chief executive and one of the co-founders and current owners of PikPok. Studied computer science and marketing and information systems here at Victoria University in Wellington. Been in the industry for 27 years because I started the games company 27 years ago, so that's quite a close correlation there. Had a former life briefly as a management consultant in retail banking. As you can imagine, game development is a lot more fun. Most of my focus at the studio is strategic planning, business development, and portfolio management. The catalyst for starting a games company, like a lot of games companies, just kind of came out of nowhere to some extent. Sony announced a home programmable PlayStation in end of 96, early 97. And I got together with a couple of friends and we thought, hey, we could make a company making video games for console. Luckily, we knew very little at the time because if we knew how much we had to learn, we may not have started at all. Here is a photo of myself and my two co-founders, Tara and Macaulay and Stuart Middleton. That's me in the back. We're all smiling because we're on a roller coaster. So probably the biggest smile you'll ever catch on me. It took a couple of years to get started, but we were very lucky in January of 2000 actually. So it took a couple of years of business development, building up some technology, kind of building this company on the side before actually being able to win a contract. And we developed Championship Surfer for the original PlayStation, partly because we were the only licensed Sony PlayStation developer in the Southern Hemisphere at the time. So that was a good advantage for us. We went on over a number of years developing a lot of different games for console, some based on different sports, rugby league, horse racing, surfing, soccer, as well as working with a lot of different kind of movie franchises like Speed Racer, Madagascar, Jackass, which was definitely a very challenging game to make, if you can imagine or remember the talent that was working on that particular TV show. That was a very hard business to be in. It remains a very hard business to be in terms of a business model. So we were looking to kind of move into making our own games and starting to tap into different digital distribution platforms, and had made a start on that when the iPhone and the App Store kind of came along in 2009, and we were able to start developing some games there, and had some early success, which allowed us to kind of really ramp up our own original IP and move away from this kind of contract work for hire business model. Some of you may remember games that have done very well for us in Europe, like Flick Kick Football, but we made a whole range of different games. It was quite an open platform that allowed for a lot of experimentation. Ultimately, we were able to turn sort of a lot of individual games into a kind of a series of brands and franchises, and that was really where we kind of moved up the ladder again. So started out as that kind of execution work for hire, became skilled enough and had enough services to do full development before moving into self-publishing original IP, developing a portfolio of original IP, and now we call ourselves both a developer and publisher of a portfolio of original franchises. So that brings us to who is PikPok today. We a developer and publisher across a lot of different platforms. While we spent a lot of the last 15 years in mobile phone and on the Apple App Store and Google Play, we've since moved back into console, also doing virtual reality and mixed reality. We've had a degree of success with about 560 million downloads of our games around the world. We distribute pretty much everywhere that we're legally allowed to, into 33 different languages to help support those markets, including Te Reo Māori, the New Zealand Indigenous language as well. We have a fairly large team now, about 235 people. That's about 180 based here in Wellington, and about 55 people in Medellin, Colombia, having acquired a smaller studio there 2.5 years ago now. We've since built that into a bigger team and have a smattering of other people working around the world. Very quickly, how we make money in what we call a free-to-play environment, which is, again, where we have had most of our success over the last 15 years. It kind of starts in the middle here, making a game which is either drawn from an original idea or bringing in a third-party license, whether that be a movie license, a toy license, whatever it might be. We'll then distribute that game globally via different digital platforms. So that's the App Store, Google Play, that might be through the Xbox or PlayStation consoles, through PC platforms like Steam, or some might distribute via platforms like the web. Players will actually be able to download that game for free, and then we make money from those players by those players watching ads, making purchases within the game, subscribing to certain features within the game, or through other ancillary means. We can drive more players into the game through digital marketing and paid user acquisition. So we have an own internal team to do that. And of course, with analytics, we're able to kind of discern what players are doing, turn that into meaningful insights and reporting that our insights team can take back to the development team to feed into new updates, new features, which we roll out, which hopefully improves both the engagement and, of course, the monetization. And all of that learning then feeds into the next game. So in terms of how we drive our revenue over time, there's sort of a few different levers. We do that by either making more games, more opportunity to make money, getting more players through better digital marketing, or working with the platforms like Apple to get featuring on the App Store, improving our games to allow players to play for longer, because the longer they play, the more opportunity to watch ads or spend, or encouraging players to be able to make more or higher purchases by making sure we're really communicating and providing that value to players. Very quick whirlwind tour there. Ultimately, though, what are games then, in terms of an export opportunity? With this sort of model, you have global market access. It's weightless. A lot of companies will have their own IP ownership, their own copyright ownership, so all of that residual revenue comes back. It can be a mostly passive revenue stream, even though a lot of games have live teams that will support it. Some games are set and forget, and if you stack up enough of them, that's quite meaningful passive revenue. And ultimately, it's not quite uncapped, but the industry is worth hundreds of billions of US dollars. So, there's a lot of opportunity for relatively small countries or individual companies to do incredibly well. A bit of a snapshot on where we get our games downloaded. There's kind of a list in order of the top 10 down the left-hand side there. As you expect, there's a lot of high population countries there. United States, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, India. China used to be on there. China is a very challenging market to get content into now, but that's a whole nother presentation. But about 20% of our downloads come from the US. In terms of where we make our money, though, this is a very different sort of a profile. So this tends to be wealthier nations, more developed nations. So as you can see there, some of those top countries: United States, Germany, UK, Australia, Canada, France, South Korea. And actually, even though the US is only 20% of our downloads, it actually makes up 50% of our overall revenue. Switching gears and looking at one of the franchises we built that's been very successful, Into the Dead. We first released a game onto mobile in December of 2012. And that was very successful for us, successful enough that it spawned a sequel, Into the Dead 2, which came out in October 2017. The first game had over 100 million downloads. This is actually says 59 on the slide there, but I know it's past 60 million downloads now. So very successful game for us, and it continues to be a strong performer. We're also developing multiple new games in this franchise as well, some of which we've announced, some of which we haven't. So Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days is actually a derivative game. So this is going into a different platform, a different genre. So we're making this for not mobile, but PC and console. And it's a different perspective, different gameplay, hoping to tap into similar sorts of gamers and similar sorts of revenue potential, but taking a different spin on things to broaden out the IP in the franchise. We've also had some great collaborations with other IP holders. So we licensed the Ghostbusters IP from Sony, Night of the Living Dead, a local New Zealand movie, Deathgasm. All of these movies we were able to kind of integrate into the game as standalone content and promotions. We've done other things too, like we have a board game sitting there, not quite sure what we're doing with it, but we made one. We had a comics to celebrate one of the big anniversaries. We've got a ton of original music that we've created with our in-house team. We did a collaboration with a local Wellington brewery. So we have our own Into the Dead beer. And we were honoured enough to even have our own stamp now for this, which was pretty exciting too. Another franchise of ours, the Rival Stars Sports Series. So started off with basketball, moved on to American college football, and Rival Stars Horse Racing is kind of the biggest title and one that we're continuing to push. So huge game for us. This is our most successful revenue title ever, not only horse racing, but equestrian sports as well. So it's appealing not only to horse racing fans, but also kind of horse lifestyle people. We're continuing to expand that title as well, and we'll be bringing that to virtual reality next year as kind of the very first focused horse riding virtual reality title, which, as you can imagine, there's a lot of challenges in making that sort of a game. It's not just us, though. In New Zealand, there are about 200 different studios now, spread across, I think it's about 1,200 different individuals working in the industry. Few names of games that you may have come across: Mini Metro from Dinosaur Polo Club, Polybridge, Path of Exile, Balloons, very successful franchises. And, you may be wondering, well, how do we manage this from a small country so far towards the edge of the map that many maps don't even include us? There's a whole Reddit on that. We've been able to be successful for a few different reasons. This is from a whole different presentation, which is a whole nother half-hour thing on its own. But I've pulled in a couple of slides. It does take time to build an industry up because effectively you need to build up multiple kind of supporting pillars at the same time. You can't just have a lot of studios build and kind of go and reach success. You need to bring in educational institutions, you need to bring in the government to be able to support, and you probably need some kind of organizing industry body to be able to kind of coordinate and lobby between these different parties. So for us, this is kind of a roadmap that we have. If you get in touch with me, I can send you this presentation, this deck. But essentially, there's a roadmap for kind of how game studios kind of have to operate as they evolve in conjunction with an industry association, with educators, with government. And, I'm pleased to say then that, New Zealand kind of looks like this in terms of where we've been able to progress to, where we still have some weaknesses, where we still have room to evolve. We've moved into Colombia, as I said, so a lot more work to do there. And if we, as PikPok, want our Colombian studio to be successful, we're making the investment in that market there to work with educators and government to build up these levels as well. So in terms of the ecosystem, some of the players, Media Design School, a private school that got very early on into game development, works very closely with industry, produces great game development talent. We have Code, the Centre of Digital Excellence, which is a kind of collaboration between a couple of different regional entities to provide sort of a incubator type model focused on gaming and very important in our ecosystem. We have our organizing body, the NZGDA. They put on a national conference, the NZGDC. Might want to check it out. We just had it in October, but we'd very much welcome you next year. And of course, different government agencies. There's many that are involved with game development now, but New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is kind of our export-focused agency, is one of the key ones that kind of helps facilitate a lot of this. New Zealand government also put in place last year a 20% tax rebate and allocated $160 million of funding over 4 years, which has been a huge benefit to us. And that's played out, I guess, in terms of the results that we've had and continued to support and develop the industry. It's probably a little bit hard to see on this particular slide, but since 2018, we've gone from $143 million in revenue to $548 million in revenue. So that's huge growth through a time. As you may remember, we had a lot of challenges for a lot of different industries, and the games industry was able to go to from strength to strength. We're at the tail end, so stick with me. In terms of what is the competitive advantage of the New Zealand games industry, this is my opinion, but I've been putting this particular one out for a while. I think what really makes New Zealand special, and this is not only for games, is that we are a cultural melting pot that consumes and is influenced by media from around the world. Of course, we have our British colonial heritage. Of course, we consume a lot of media from the US and North America, Australia, but we also have our own indigenous culture, the Pacific Island cultures, Southeast Asia, China, a lot of different backgrounds kind of represented here. Latin America coming in more recently too. So that exposes us to a lot of things as a people, and that in turn kind of enables this creative expression, this creative output that has the ability to kind of hit and resonate globally and be meaningful globally. And you can see that in our film, in our fashion, in our design, our music, and our games industry. So I think that's the competitive advantage that we've been able to find. We do have challenges though. Market here is more competitive than ever before. Our games industry is competitive worldwide, so higher budgets, more investment. Rising cost of living is happening all around the world. It's definitely happening here in New Zealand. Demand for talent continues to drive things up. We have a very kind of limited VC culture here. Venture money is very expensive relative to other places you could get it from in the world, so can mean that accessing bridging finance or capital can be difficult. And there are many skills gaps and experience gaps to close in order for studios to deliver on their potential. So last slide, what are the New Zealand opportunities now? I think, we're wanting to amplify further that reputation for high quality, innovative content, and, get those more traction for those commercially successful games and that stuff that's coming up. And Dan may have a few things here to talk to about this, and he's leading an initiative there. We're also, trying to leverage that trade relationship with China to reopen that market. We're trying to work with government to expand, the support and tax rebate system to make a few things a little bit easier. And of course, very complex subject. Again, probably a presentation on its own, investing in the exploration and utilization of AI to support development and publishing functions. So not only making games, but how we exploit those games, get them out there. So that is that. This is me, if you want to get hold of me, but of course, we'll be around to answer some questions.
Mario, thank you for that. I appreciate you putting together that deck for us and also running through the detailed history that you have and just trying to cram it all in for us. And there will be questions, and I remind everybody on the call to utilize the chat system as well for asking the questions. We'll come back to it later on, but thank you, first of all, Mario. You're going to stick around and answer some questions at the end. And I just want to leverage that talking point right at the end about all the stuff is happening in New Zealand around the gaming industry, and we got another two people now to share what they're doing in their space. So I'm going to ask Dan to turn on his mic, and I'm going to give him a little bit of an introduction before we get underway. And me and Dan are going to have a conversation versus a presentation from Dan, a bit more live, a bit more kind of open for that. But very briefly, Dan has had equally nearly as much time in the space, 20 years in the gaming community. He's helped millions kind of experience the coding and the joy of gaming as a medium and as a thing to learn and develop through. He's previously served as a games commissioner for New Zealand On Air, which sounds like what it is as a government agency, all to do with broadcast and stuff like that. And he's developing and always been at the forefront and involved in the gaming community heavily. So Dan, it's great to have you with us this evening. Thank you, man.
Thanks, DK. And it's a pleasure to be here. Mario, loved it. Great slide deck. I learned some stuff about our industry tonight. Cheers. So yeah, I've been working in the game space for 20 years, like DK said, and for 15 of those, I've been running my own business in the games and education space. Before working in education, I was making mobile phone games on like Nokia 3350 phones, I think they were called, and they had like 300 pixel by 300 pixel squared screens. So always enjoyed kind of like making content that had these very tight constraints. And so we were making these mobile phone games for ad agencies in the early 2000s. And while we were making these games, I saw a gap in the market to create a platform for other people to make games. And we launched this platform in an early version of Facebook, because Facebook used to let us publish games like directly in the Facebook experience. And so we launched this platform, and overnight there were hundreds of people making mini games using this technology that we built. And it was at this point that I realized I was totally hooked. And what I wanted to do for a career was make tools that allowed other people to make games. So we realized pretty quickly, though, that our users weren't meant to be, and they weren't indie game devs, but they were schools, teachers, and kids. And this meant that I had to learn all about delivering game development products to frickin' 10-year-olds, something I'm still figuring out. We realized pretty quick, excuse me, that Gamefroot has done most of its work in the New Zealand edtech space. We work in the business of teaching intermediate-aged kids how to code using games-based technology. So imagine learning maths through coding a space shooting game, or learning about bacteria by making a game about germs. That's what we did. And last year, I moved away from running Gamefroot full-time, having licensed our platform to a university in America, which brings me to my latest project, StoryMate, where I'm working with adults at last and adult writers to help them create beautiful interactive stories and game books.
Like, that's a whirlwind right there, man. And I know you personally, so I know some of the things that you've been doing, but I really appreciate that summary, because that's a great summarization of how I would like you to introduce yourself. It's brilliant. But I want to kind of come back a little bit. You kind of mentioned Gamefroot and really exploring that platform, Facebook, and then the learning that you had to embody because you didn't intend the product to be used in the way that the market decided to use it. So what were the big discoveries during that time, and what did you had to do? How did you have to pivot, and kind of how did you have to kind of break your own ideas of what you were trying to do?
Yeah, well, on one hand, we'd found users for our technology, yay. But on the other hand, those users weren't paying customers, which was a big boo. And by that, I mean 10-year-olds don't have much money set aside for educational gaming tech. So it was a journey of pivots, really. And we had to learn how to sell our technology to schools and teachers and parents and a whole raft of other stakeholders that weren't actually the people using our technology. And I think doing that was probably the hardest, most draining thing I've ever had to do professionally.
Mm.
I can
imagine.
It's called a derivative market, where our actual customers aren't our users.
Mm. And then in terms of like taking a step back now, what you've learned from that and what advice you would give to people who are developing games or platforms for gaming, which are two very different things, but they are the same thing as well within the wider discourse of this stuff. Kind of what was your big learning, and what would you apply and help other people to think about when they are taking something to market, whatever that might be?
Yeah, well, firstly, I don't think any business is for the faint-hearted, right? Um,
Mm.
I would probably not create a business again where we were bridging two different technologies like education and games. For a number of years, I've found that made it harder for me to relate to my peers in the industry. For example, sometimes my problems were different to, like, say, Mario's problems. Mario might be busy conquering the App Store while I was wrestling with school boards. You know what I mean? So, and it just sort of doing business like that made it harder. And I think doing it all again, I would probably keep things more simple and focus on the consumer space. Not that tools in the education space like Gamefroot haven't had their fair share of impact as well. So it's been a different journey. I never anticipated I'd be working in the education space.
Definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit about then the New Zealand ecosystem, just because I think there's going to be a lot of learnings and insights from your reflections from the time that you were in there for the 2 decades you've been in it, and the other roles that you played within the gaming community. And just asking you that really open question, what do you see both the problems with the New Zealand games industry that it faces, and how has it overcome it? And also, what does it face now? Because Mario did touch on some of those, but I'd love for your take on it.
Well, I agree that New Zealand suffers from a bit of a talent shortage, and largely what I've heard from my peers in the industry is that the efforts to resolve that are around offshore talent acquisition. My solution is a little bit different to conventional methods. I'm more interested in finding better and more innovative ways to train our young people on how to make games, so that when they go to college, they already have many hundreds of hours of game making experience under their belt. There's an author, Malcolm Gladwell, who said it takes approximately 10,000 hours of practice to achieve mastery in a particular field. So therefore, the earlier we can get the next generation using the tools of our trade, the better equipped they're going to be to enter the games industry. So that's kind of my focus and where a lot of my time is spent. I think about that a lot.
Definitely. And in terms of then your previous focus of running a games studio, like what are the main challenges that other people or insights that other people can learn from you that both you failed at, but also succeeded at, to help accelerate them if they're thinking about setting up or is currently running a game studio?
Well, for my advice, my usual go-to advice for young people who want to get into the games industry is to come up with a portfolio of content, and don't turn up to a studio with half-finished bits of games or half-finished experiments. I think it's important to turn up with a portfolio of completed work to show that you've got that grit that it takes to see something through from start to finish. How do you feel about that answer, DK? Did that answer your question?
That works. For sure, man.
Good.
Yeah, I love that. How would you feel about that? I feel great. So because of your experience and because you've actually moved and pivoted a few times, can I ask you as well then, what are the trends you're seeing in this gaming community / market?
Well, in my market, in the area where I'm kind of moving and shaking, digital technologies and learning to code has become compulsory in schools in New Zealand and in many other countries around the world. This is an epic shift in tides from when I started. Games-based learning has become a ubiquitous term that will yield you some good Google results. So if you wanted to do something in this space, like I have, and help prepare the next generation, the market's never been better. Beyond game development, gamification techniques are being embraced in websites and apps to increase online engagement more and more. This is especially true for EdTech, and we're seeing elements like points, badges, leaderboard systems. Love them or hate them, these are the tools, these are tools from the game maker's toolkit that are making learning more interactive and more enjoyable. So again, it's a good time to be working in the games and education space if you've got a little bit of grit in you.
Grit is important, man. Yeah. So just to close out this little conversation and little introduction for you, I'd love to, just because you teased that, again pivoted and now you're into that interactive storytelling, just give us the kind of pitch for what you're doing right now.
So if you're familiar with tools like Twine, you should have a sense of what we're making. It has the best bits of Twine, plus a really great writing experience, all wrapped up in a modern contemporary interface. It's a web platform called StoryMate, and it started off as a bit of a homage to interactive fiction and the steady diet of choose your own adventure books I grew up on. But it's fast becoming a serious tool for adult writers. Our goal is to foster a community of storytellers and transform how stories are told in the digital age. And I think by leveraging our history in video games and kind of digging deep into our toolkit, I believe we can do it.
Fascinating. And that's in market now, or is it in development to go to market?
There's a version live at the moment, but it's actually kind of embarrassing. Okay, so don't look.
We won't look. We'll do it like that and look through our fingers, man. But it's always good to know what you're working on. And also, I love the way that you said, this has been informed by your direct experience of video gaming and storytelling there. That's key.
Yeah, I think there's so many other markets that can leverage the lessons we've learned in the games industry. And we're starting to see that more and more online and in web.
Definitely. Well, Dan, thank you for that. We're going to keep you there because there's going to be questions coming your way, I'm sure. And again, the community can ask in the chat, and we're going to bring all three of our speakers together. But for now, thank you, Dan, for that great insight to who you are and what you've up to and what you're currently doing. But we won't look, maybe a little bit, but thank you. So I'm going to pivot again a little bit into our third and last but not least speaker. So we have Jessica joining us again from I think Wellington or maybe up north. I can't. She's been bouncing around, hence why she came in a little bit late. That's great to have you, Jessica. It's great to see your face. We're going to ask you to unmute while I give you a proper intro. In terms of, you probably would have already read Jessica's intro, and this is a very different gaming discussion now in terms of the business that she is running, very much around that immersive and VR experience, and she runs a company and co-founded a company called Beyond, and is pushing this technical boundaries to create a generation of immersive virtual world. It's great to have Jessica with us, dear friend of mine, and also she's got 50 minutes to kind of tell us all about you, what you're up to, and any insights you can share to the Welsh market who is intrigued by what you're up to. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you. Kia ora, everybody. Hope you can hear me well. Yes. Perfect. Yeah, apologies that I'm a little bit late, but wonderful to be here. And yeah, so I'm an old friend of DK. We worked together a long time ago. And then for the last kind of 8 years, I've been working in immersive technology with a focus on virtual and augmented reality gaming. So I gained an interest in this when I had an experience for the first time putting a VR headset on and had one of those wow moments that we sometimes have in life, and thought, oh, this is for me. Like, I love games, I love entertainment, I love bringing joy to others, I love new technology, and I could see this intersection of this new technology and the experiences I'd had in my life in theatre and film coming and being brought together into this technology. And that's what brought me to create my company Beyond. And we focus solely on virtual and augmented reality, and now we call it spatial gaming. But the terms love to change a lot: XR, VR, AR. They all get spun around all over the show. But really, it's about creating experiences that are immersive, that make you be the player in the game, the person in the experience. And I've done a range of things over the years. My first game was a game called Oddball, and it was all about healthy entertainment. This mission to bring people together, to make them social, have fun together in an environment, in an immersive game that was healthy and fun and didn't have zombies in it. I was trying to do something that I could put my son in, and he was 6 at the time. So I was like, how do I be okay with him playing a game? And my partner and I came up with this game, Oddball, which was turning people into giant, you fire things at them, little balls, and they turn into giant pineapples, or they turn into giant cactuses. And it was about, 8 players together in a 10 by 10 meter space. So it was free roam VR using one of the Quest 1 headsets. Although at the time, being in New Zealand, quite far away from everything else, we didn't actually have the headsets. We weren't provided any dev kits. So we were actually building on OptiTracks, and we were using backpack PCs that we kind of made ourselves in a rather ghetto kind of warehouse in the back of Wellington. And we made our first game, and we then finally got some headsets. We bought them, and we transferred everything onto the Quest 1 and made our own kind of tracking system. Like, health and safety was quite important. How do you make sure that 8 people do not collide when they're in VR? So, had our tracking system, had everyone playing together, and it was wonderful. We just, we had so many people come through and play this game of all sorts, from 11 years old through to 80 years old. It really was a game that just appealed to everyone. And it was one of those moments in life where, you have a mission and a vision, and it comes true. And was very fortunate. And then we managed to sell it into a place in LA called 2-Bit Circus. So it was like, oh my goodness, you're a startup entrepreneur and you've raised a bit of capital. And we sold our game. We met some people at IAPA over in the US and sold it in there. And we went over and we set it up in this room, and it was amazing. And it was February 2020, and we were like, yeah. And then we got back to New Zealand, and we're like, this is weird. Why are they asking where we've come, from when we come back to New Zealand, and what's going on? There's something strange. And we all know what happened then. COVID hit, the arcade industry and any kind of location-based entertainment kind of came to an end. And so, 2 years of hard work kind of went through the window, and my investors called me up and said, I'm sorry, it's over. But it wasn't. We persevered through, and we transitioned into making consumer games, again with a focus on VR and AR. And through that time, we've kind of carried on. We've made a bunch of different things. And I guess our latest game is one for the Apple Vision Pro. And it's a casual endless runner. And you get to play this little character, Hank, and you've got to kind of help him get across, from one world to another. That's all hand controls. So you're kind of pinch to jump, and you've got these little traps that you've got to disarm. But yeah, it's been an interesting 8 years of kind of going through from, VR to AR, ups and downs, transitioning as the industry changes, moving as the technology changes, but I guess always being at kind of the bleeding edge of what's happening in immersive technology. And at the moment now, we're working on getting virtual games into high schools to get kids moving using VR as a tool for those that wouldn't traditionally do maybe exercise or other kind of sports, and getting them playing VR. So that's our current little mission, which comes kind of back to what our original game was, Oddball, which got kids moving and sweating without even thinking about it, So that's me.
Again, a whirlwind tour around what you've been up to, and there's so much more, Jessica, that I know that you've been doing. So that was an amazing insights to what do. And I just want to follow up with a quick question as well around kind of the grit. I think Dan already mentioned this, the versatility to continue and follow your vision through and learn. and you already illustrated that when you kind of kickstarted your original plan. You had to kind of bootstrap it and make things up. But during COVID and that transitional period of time, how did you kind of endure through that? And what was the driving factor behind all that, those things?
Yeah, I think part of it is making sure you're really strong on what your vision and mission is, and if you are really clear about what it is you want to achieve, then I believe you can get through most things. The hardest things, we didn't have a pandemic on our on our plan. There was no kind of risk of what this might happen, but when it did happen, it was pretty horrific. All the sponsorships fell off, the investors fell off, but you realize who's on the boat with you, who's going to come through those rough seas, and I think that's one of the most important lessons I learned is who do you surround yourself by, whether it's investors or your team or your founders, and then sticking true to your mission and vision. And if you have that and you really believe in it, then you can kind of keep going because you've got that with you. And for me at that time, it would have been very easy just to give it all up and say, oh well, what, COVID is a great excuse for closing a business. And nobody's gonna say anything bad to, like, oh yeah, that happened. But if you get through it and you keep going, I think that shows a lot, and the people that stand by you and stick with you. So yeah, find the right team, the right people, the right investors, and have a really strong vision and mission. And so for us, it was like, well, we want to keep making games. We want to make VR accessible. We want to bring this technology to as many people as possible. And so because we knew that, we knew we could keep going. And so we came up with new ideas and new games, and that helped us get new investment.
Boom. And give us a sense of scale beyond in terms of the team, how many people, where do you outsource to, do you insource? What's the company as it looks today?
Well, it changes so much. We're a small little indie team. We've ranged from, I think the maximum we've ever had as employees has been 15. So, not big, but, for me, that was quite a lot. That's a lot of people's salaries that, you sit on, much less than Mario. So, kudos to anyone that brings jobs and, helps the economy of a country. It's quite a weight that sits on you when you do that. And you really do care. You really care about every single person that works in your company and what it means for their families. And then currently, we're pretty small, and a lot of our team are contractors. So, it kind of goes up and down, but we've never been much bigger than that.
Brilliant. Well, don't run away. We're going to keep you for an extra half hour, if that's okay, along with the other two gents on the call. And this is time again to remind everybody who's joining us today to utilize the chat. If you want to do a voice question, please stick your virtual hand up and I'll come to you. But as the MC, I'm going to play my MC kind of card and kind of privilege card and ask the first question to all three of you, if that's okay, and I'll kind of direct it accordingly. But a lot of you have already touched on the idea of partnerships and collaborations. And I want to kind of unpack that just a little bit, and even through maybe a leadership lens, because all of you have led in some way or another, either an idea, a vision, or a company, right? So the partnership kind of question is simply like, a lot of you have had success, you've had to pivot, you've had to change, you've had to chase down ideas. So how key is partnerships, and how do you decide on what partnerships need more investment or not, or chasing down? How do you decide on the human level of partnerships? That's what I'm talking about here. I'm going to start with Mario because you went first, and go through to Dan and then Jessica. So if it's okay, just to wrap on that for a little bit, Mario, how do you kind of approach partnerships in whatever sense that means for you?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's been really important to conduct ourselves with a lot of integrity. New Zealanders are typically very nice people, but it's also been important for that to kind of carry into the commercial side, in the sense of we do what we promise to do. We don't screw anyone over. We help where we can. We try to approach things in as fair a way as possible. And I think that's that set us up really well for those moments where times are tough, or you need to pivot, or you need to create a new partnership or lean on an existing partnership, because at the end of the day, when times get tough, integrity really matters, because you have to be able to turn to people you can trust, and they need to be able to trust you. For us, I guess what the key relationships that have really mattered over the last 15 years in particular, given that we are direct to consumer business, are the relationships with the platform manufacturers. So Apple, Google, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and also to those people that help us make and monetize our games. So that might include, companies like Unity, for example. So, it's really important for us to understand not only what they can do for us, but we need to understand where they're going and what we need to compromise, or how we need to kind of tilt our business to meet their needs too. So from our perspective, the partnerships are everything, because in the mobile space on the App Store, Apple is the kingmaker. So the better that relationship, the more insight you can get, the more you can deliver when they ask you to jump through a hoop every time, the more that will pay off over the long run.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mario. That was wonderful. And Dan, similar question to you. How would you react to that question around partnerships / relationships?
Yeah, well, I guess my take, DK, is that firstly, to form a partnership, you've got to get out there and meet people. And of course, that sounds really obvious, but it doesn't come naturally to everyone, right? I remember I've sat in cafes in Wellington where Mario sort of said to me, Dan, you got to go to GDC in San Francisco. It's just where business happens. And the first year I went to GDC in San Francisco, the Global Game Developers Conference, I was at a social event and met with Ninja Kiwi, who's a company based in New Zealand, but we just don't network. We don't kind of hang out. And so bumped into them at this party, and we just got talking, and I was able to articulate what we do, what we did in Gamefroot, and they kind of bought into our vision, and they let us create a learning resource on how to build one of their games. And and we've done that with a handful of other game studios. It's sort of these authentic partnerships with other studios in the games industry has allowed us, as a business that does work in the educational space, remain authentic. And we know that the learning people experience through our tech is based on real games and real programming skills that you need. And I just know that we couldn't do any of this stuff alone. So yeah, it's all about getting out there and finding your people.
Finding your tribe, definitely. Thank you, Dan. That's wonderful insights. And again, over to you, Jessica. What insights can you bring to that as a question?
I think similar to others, I think collaboration, is a bedrock to innovation. You need to find community, you need to find others. Innovation comes when diverse people come together, when we can share resources, we can share connections. We're very fortunate in New Zealand and Wellington to have people like Dan and Mario who are very generous with their contacts, but that we share that. And I think that's such an amazing and vital thing, and that comes from trust, it comes from reputation, but it is also comes from being those people who do what you say you're going to do, and if you have that integrity and you do that, then people will trust and they will recommend you. I think one of those things is finding those people, and doing your DD. We haven't all collaborated with people that it's all gone perfectly, and sometimes we haven't done our DD, and we think and we believe what someone says, and it's not always true, and it doesn't always turn out so well. And I've certainly had those experiences. So, it's being really careful, but it's also, being open and like looking for the right people, who are genuine, who do what they say. And as Mario said before, building those relationships like Apple, we were featured at WWDC 24 because we built a relationship with Apple with our game, and we jumped on everything they said, will you fix this? And it was Friday night, and we would work all weekend to fix it so that on Monday morning it was ready for them, and that wasn't easy, and you're having to ask extra of the team, but we knew that was so important, because it really that was vital for us. And it's not always easy, but those things are really important. Those relationships are important. So yeah, that's probably my addition.
I love that. And DD, for everybody, that's due diligence, I would imagine, just for everybody's listening.
Yes, sorry.
And I'm also reminded, no, it's all good. And I'm also reminded, just because I've just come back from Wales, I've spent a year there and been here for over 12 years in New Zealand. There's something in the Kiwiana kind of language set around mana, which is, as we all know, that the Te Reo Maori idea of someone holding great presence, doing what they say they will do, have good spirit. And in Wales, we have a word called hoil, which is often shouted at rugby games, bit more hoil, lads. But actually, hoil is about heart, a bit more vim and vigor. It's about, being more intentional with your actions. And it's the same idea. I think. So for people on the call, we got mana in terms of New Zealand, and then hoil. Have a little bit of hoil to what you do. But I am yearning as well. If you got a candle and you give someone else who's got a candle, you can share that light, and you doesn't diminish your light once you share that light. And again, I think that's the big insight that I'm hearing from all of you here, is share the light often. You never diminish your own. But we have a couple of questions now. I'm going to stop talking because there's a couple of questions here that I want to give voice and agency to from our community. Again, utilize that chat. These are people, it's great to get these questions in. I know Luke just had to drop off, so bless him. He did ask a question, which I'm going to pick it up on. Question for Mario in terms of the volume and size, volume of market research and user insights for a mobile game. What's a typical size of audience you'd approach for bringing a new IP and or new game mechanic to market?
That's a really good question, and I think one of the challenges in the mobile game space is, to a degree, size of the audience doesn't matter. The amount of revenue that you can generate is the metric that matters more. So, there are games that, for example, we were able to find an audience and generate 100 million downloads for our original Into the Dead game as a much more casual experience. We've only had kind of about half that number with the sequel, but it's a much more mid-core game, a lot more involved, slightly different sort of user. And that game has been able to generate, with only half the downloads, 6 times as much revenue. So typically when we're looking at sizing a market and trying to work out, do we want to greenlight something? We'll look at the overall genre, the type of audience that we might be able to capture in that, what are the competitors generating in terms of revenue. Right now, our metric for kind of greenlighting something is we won't greenlight a completely original game without an expectation of being able to make at least $20 million US. So that's kind of our metric. And in the mobile game space, that's arguably a little bit small, given there are games out there that are doing, $100 million a month. But that for us is kind of the metric. Lifetime, we want to be making the sorts of games with the sorts of opportunities in the sorts of markets that can make at least $20 million US.
Thank you for that's some Pure insight right there. Thank you, Mario. And I'm going to pivot that also and throw it open to Jessica as well, because you're developing games for a specific market. You ended your little introduction about you're developing for the Apple Vision Pro now. So was that a real hard decision? Like Mario said, there's an IP, there's a platform, there are gamers. Tell us about your metric for entering into a market.
Yeah, I mean, look, going into that market was a hard decision. It was something, we'd always, since I started working in the industry, had been waiting for Apple to have a headset. So, it was kind of a little bit of I'm not going to say necessarily business sense around the how size, how big that size of that market is. And we certainly the revenue numbers, we knew, that their target was around 500,000 headsets. So, you start to do the numbers there on what people are going to download and how many are going to download it. And like, it's a small number. So it was really more about positioning, about brand awareness, about being one of the first to market on that. So it was a very different motivation than revenue. So that was very different for us. It was about showcasing our talent and what we could do in that, and then therefore the opportunities that would come out of that for funding to be able to make a bigger game, to be able to go onto other, other platforms. Of course, with the Meta headset, there's a lot bigger market there. We're looking about 40 million people who have headsets there. So, it's a lot bigger opportunity. And so when you're looking at a game, of course, that's naturally where we'd look. And we do look, to make games. So Apple Vision Pro was a little bit different from, say, the traditional way that you might look at something. So, you kind of got to, it's not always necessarily about revenue.
Gotcha. And sticking with you, Jessica, just because you got your mic on, is a direct question to you from Leon there about how big is the gap between developing games for PC/console/phone and VR? The gap, I think, might be the market or maybe in development times.
Like time or cost or market. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but I mean, it can range. I mean, traditionally when we started working in virtual reality, it wasn't about AAA games, right? Or one of the biggest games is Beat Saber. It's a very simple game, and it wouldn't have cost more than maybe 100,000, 200,000 to make originally. So indie developers were making a lot of money originally on that platform. In fact, I think the top 8 games out of 10 were indie developers rather than the much larger studios, because simple mechanics go a long way in the immersive sector, and they didn't necessarily have to be long form adventures. However, that is changing. And people are expecting more of that platform, and they might be expecting more content and longer content. And so that market and that audience has matured as the platform has matured. So, we might have been able to, potentially have, 6 months to 12 months, to make something for that platform on a much lower budget. That expectation is changing, and those costs are changing, and the expectation around, the quality is changing. So anything is, how long is a piece of string? How big is your game? How much is it going to cost? But I can tell you for our Apple Vision Pro game, we did it within 6 months is what we did. But again, because we knew it's a new platform, we want to be as quick as possible. We don't want to spend too much money and too much time on something. We need to test it out, get it out there, and see what the feedback is, and then we can build on top of that. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's amazing, because yes, lovely. And I wanted to bring Dan in here because of your experience with New Zealand On Air when you were guiding people in terms of they were applying to launch new games and help studios to navigate that space a little bit. What did you see in when the intentionality of game studios going, we'd like to make a game for this market, versus what you were then guiding them go, well, that's going to be too big, or that's not the market you want to focus in? Were there any trends that you were constantly seeing as a FAQ, a thing that they were doing wrong that you could share here? Oh, you're on mute.
The interesting thing about working as the games commissioner for New Zealand On Air was partly around the small size of budgets. There wasn't a huge amount of money going around. So we were trying to help studios make games with not a lot. And so these studios, who were largely startups, would have these grandiose ideas, and would put in proposals for like $30,000 or $60,000, and we'd know that those budgets weren't kind of aligning with the reality of how much time it takes to make a game. And so I guess what I did was just help people with the fundamentals. So does your game have a game loop? Does it have something in it that's inherently replayable? And you'd be sort of surprised that quite a lot of these games didn't. So we would sort of, it was, in some ways, it was about kind of cutting scope and removing things that weren't necessary and trying to find just a core nugget of fun. And that's something I think all games should have, either as a singularity or sprinkled throughout the entire experience. Yeah, it was a fun experience, and it was a great opportunity to get to play with others and sort of be a part of their ideas, and also get a bit of insight of what new companies and new studios are doing in New Zealand.
Fascinating. So I'm going to stick with you, Dan, because we've got a great question from Jay that I'm going to go again around all the speakers that we have here. Jay asked, how and where do you see new gaming audience segments emerging, and possibly connected to that, what room is there, what pathways are there for more diverse talent and entrance into the industry? Over to you, Dan.
Ooh, well, like right now, like I said, I'm working on a platform for making interactive fiction and interactive stories, and so I'm seeing all my friends and peers in the industry doing all this cool XR AR stuff. So naturally, I'm thinking, well, how can what do interactive fiction stories look like through an AR lens? And like Jess was saying before, there's these opportunities that present themselves, and you have to move quickly, like with the Apple headset. And so yeah, we're actively looking at how we can take a traditional, proven method of engagement, and how can we apply a new contemporary AR lens to that. And yeah, and we'll sort of see how that goes.
Brilliant. And Jessica, same questions for you around audience and segments emerging, and what pathways for diverse talent and entrance into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of diverse talent, I think, as I said before, diversity is key for anything, whether it's creation, it's the people that we're developing for our community. Everybody has something that they love, and that's what the beauty of games is that we can all make something different and unique for different communities, and what different people love. And that's the beauty of it, whether it's a sim game or, a dance game or a shooter, like there's just so much available, and I love that about it. But right now, as I said, I'm working in the area of kind of fitness and gamification, and games that make people move. And I see that as a really huge area right now, as a potential new audience, and something that we're focusing on. And of course, in VR and AR, and the beauty of it is that if you're playing a game and you're moving and you're not thinking about it being physical exercise, and suddenly you realize 20 minutes later you've been sweating and moving and you've just exercised, what a beautiful way to get your fitness in a day. And I think there's a huge area and audience for that, and that's only going to continue to grow, and particularly for our young people as well. I think it's going to be a really interesting new segment of an audience to go for.
I love that, fitness by stealth. Right there. I love it. Mario, over to you with that same question.
I think what's great about what's happening with the industry and games as a medium is just more and more people are playing games all the time. So, we've seen you know, the number of women come up to the number of men that are playing games. Older gamers, you know, retired people, young people, very young people. So I think when we're looking at the market, where we're trying to find spots in the market where there might be an unmet need or an underserved opportunity where we feel we can be a leader. But in terms of where we're seeing market opportunities arising in the shorter to medium term, I think looking at different territories is really interesting. You know, India is growing really rapidly as a market. We're just starting to see Africa starting to emerge, their games industry starting to come together. That's probably going to be an interesting market in the future. And within the number of people kind of entering the lower middle class to middle class in Southeast Asia and Latin America, those are two big territories as well that, you know, will be much bigger kind of revenue opportunities in the future. But for me, I in the far future, I am definitely, you know, we're making investment now in mixed reality, and I think mixed reality as a platform is not only going to be an exciting opportunity for video games, but I feel like it is going to be a paradigm shift for society in the same way that you know, iPhones and smartphones you know, have completely changed the way that we live and work and engage with information and each other. So so I think the longer term bet for me is mixed reality, but yeah, right now, you know, we're focusing on our core markets, but keeping an eye on those emerging territories.
So let's ask pick the question out. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to all these. So I'm going to pick a question from Leo. Yes, here. Who's that? Leon? Sorry, asking. It's to you, Mario. But then I'm going to switch over to Jessica and Dan as well, because I think it's relatable about the percentage of your budget that goes to market, and what are the subsidiary kind of things you mentioned that did the comics and board games come out of there, so they fund side quests. But the original question is what kind of percentage your marketing, your budget goes towards marketing games, Mario?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, we are actually, you know, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, US dollars, on direct paid marketing. So this is where we're advertising in mobile apps and other mobile phone games to get people to come to our games. So there's a pretty big ongoing spend there. You know, we do have our own internal marketing and publishing team as well. So we have community management, social engagement. We've got in-house market design, video team. So we're spending a lot of money overall, but you know, relative to the games themselves, games are super expensive to make, and you know, the Into the Dead, Our Darkest Games, Our Darkest Days game is going to cost us well over 10 million New Zealand dollars, which is not small. Now, marketing is a decent portion of that, and will be over time, but you're talking maybe about 10% of that. So over time, we'll probably spend $1 to $2 million in marketing on that particular title. So that's kind of the balance we have right now. You know, you can spend a lot more in marketing, but you know, our particular approach is very development first. So you know, that's where we're making our major investment.
Thank you for your honesty there, Mario. And Jessica, same for you.
Yeah, I once got told you should spend about 30% on marketing, and I certainly have
Mm.
never done that because most of it goes on development as well, and it always goes over
Mm-hmm.
budget, and it always takes longer than you think it's going to take and cost more. And I wish, having come from a bit of a marketing and PR background, that I always had more money at the end for it, and so often have to be a little bit kind of stealth and shoestring and innovative with the marketing tactics that we do. So often it's way leaner than I'd like it to be, which is why I often focus on PR, and really try to get good relationships with press and with with those people early on, build those relationships again. They're so key. And of course, if you're doing innovative things, then, it can be a little bit easier to get out there and get your game out there. Events, I'm quite big on putting on events and being obviously present at expos and all those kind of things as much as possible. But there's been times when I haven't been able to afford to have an actual booth at, say, IAPA, and so we've hired a hotel room, and we've gone to the expo, and then we've found the people we want to find, and we've pulled them out to our hotel room and shown them our game, and that's helped us, get our game somewhere. So often the hustle is sometimes what we have to spend our money on, because we don't always have that budget to be able to do everything that we'd love to do. But it is such an important factor, and you really, if you can put the money into it and spend it wisely, it is such an important thing and to do for your game.
And Dan, reflecting on your experiences within the gaming community and Gamefroot and your plans for what you're working on now, where was budgeting and marketing for you? What approach did you take?
Well, I'm probably not the right guy to talk to about marketing spends. Gamefruit never spent a penny on marketing. All of the users came from word of mouth and partnerships. So the partnerships we formed did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. But because our partnerships were based on making resources on how to build other people's games, you could say that was content marketing, and that was quite expensive. I'd say we were probably spending at least an equal amount of money on that as we were development.
No, different answer,
off.
but an answer, right? Yeah. So thank you. And it paid off, like you just said. So thank you for your honesty, mate. We're coming up to time, but I don't want to leave without asking the obvious question, which is about the future of the gaming, both in New Zealand and globally, both with the tech that's arriving, the big looming AI, which the question has been coming out. So I want to ask for and we'll go in reverse order again from Dan to Jessica and Mario, about what you're seeing, what you're hopeful for, what you're worried about, whether it be technology, whether it be lack of personnel. What do you think the next 5 years for both New Zealand and the global state of gaming is going to be? Start with you, Dan.
Well, I'm excited. I'm a big fan of what's happening in the AI space. But from a position of where it's being used not to augment human creativity. And I think if we can use artificial intelligence to make our businesses grow faster and evolve faster, then that's cool, right? And so, yeah, we're with StoryMate. AI is a part of that, but me being me, I'm quite precious around not wanting to, replace people where possible, and have it help people get better at what they like to do anyway. And in the case of StoryMate, that's writing. And I think AI is quite well suited to solving that problem and helping lots of people become better writers. As for the really big questions there, DK, I think I'd feel more comfortable handing the mic over to Mario.
Well, thank you, Dan, for your insights there. But I'm going to go to Jessica first and end with Mario. Yeah. Jessica, what are you seeing for the future yourself and also for the whole gaming community?
I think in a world that has become very isolated, I think the future is social gaming. I think the connection and social element of gaming is more and more vital. It's something that we have been focused on for some time, and I'm seeing the growth in that, particularly obviously in the sector where I'm in, which is virtual reality. When we first started out, we got told by Meta we only want single player games. I can pretty much tell you now that that is a very different conversation you'd have from them now around multiplayer games, and you can, just look at, the games that are now wildly popular, like Gorilla Tag, just to see how that importance of connection and being able to be online with others is. And I see that as a huge growth area, and something where is only going to continue, is people being able to play together online, and that connection that comes together. No matter where you are in the world, you can play and you can have fun and you can connect and you can build relationships and friendships. And I think that's only going to become more and more important. And, again, of course, doubling down on XR, on this, the hardware that's coming, the advancements that are coming. It's going so fast, and it's only going to continue, and the investments are happening in all areas of the industry. So if we have great talent and great content being made, then this is the area that I see a huge growth in and huge opportunities in for all of us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessica. I love that social gaming and very positive lens from the isolation we're all probably feeling at the moment. So Mario, the same question to you.
Yeah, I think for us, we're going through a process where we're, really focusing on this kind of franchise strategy, doubling down on our success, our strengths, really dialing in and being very deliberate and focused in terms of what we're working on, and, what we choose to spin up in terms of new projects. That is taking us across more platforms. So we're kind of across everything now, and because what we see the opportunity is to overcome one of the challenges, which is discovery, and actually it's so expensive to find every customer now that when we want a customer, we want them to be a fan of a particular line of games, not only for the game that they enter into our portfolio in, but on multiple expressions from that franchise, so that we can have that customer for decades. Outside of that, I think you mentioned AI. I think there's a lot of challenges around AI. There's a lot of exciting opportunity. It is frightening and exciting at the same time, and the implications that it has for all manner of industries and human society and how we live. For games, I guess there are a lot of legal, ethical, moral and morale issues to tackle there. So we're being very careful, but the reality is when you talk to everyone at a place like GDC, everybody is using it. And if you're not working out how to integrate AI tools to unlock productivity, to become a force multiplier for creativity, then you're going to get left behind. So, I think people definitely need to come to terms with it as a tool. It's not going away. It's evolving faster than governments can legislate around it and control it. So you need to master it and work out how to use it.
For sure. Look, I want to thank you for all your time, but before I let you go, a quick rundown of where people can find you and where they can reach out, and what's the best kind of route. I know, Mario, you offered happy to send your deck to people and you put your email up, but quickly, Mario, where can people get in touch with you on the best platform?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find if you type in my name. LinkedIn is probably a pretty easy place, or just email me on mario@pikpok.com. I get a lot of emails those, but don't be afraid to chase me up and say, hey, I still want to talk and you never responded to my email. So sometimes I need that bit of a prod, but mario@pikpok.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. And you've got some chat there who wants to revitalize John Olomu World Cup rugby stuff. So yeah, I'm sure that you'll have that. Dan, over to you. How can people reach out, get hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good choice, and Dan at Gamefroot, FROOT.com.
Brilliant. And Jessica, last but not least.
Yeah, I was just about to write it in the chat, but yes, LinkedIn again is good. Jessica Manins and Jessica at Beyond.fun is how you can get in touch with me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, kia ora, and thank you really for all these three humans here over in New Zealand, Aotearoa, for staying up late. And thank you as well on the other side of the planet. So diolch yn fawr over there in Wales. Thank you for your time and attention. Robin has already dropped in to the chat there a link, and you could just scroll up and very see it for our last but not least, our third session that we're doing next Tuesday. So please sign up for that, where we go in deep around video effects and the future of the virtual production as well. But thank you for your time, your attention. Thank you for all you good humans, Jessica, Mario, and Dan. Thank you for Media Cymru and Robin and Ellie and everybody else at Media Cymru for hosting us here. And we'll see you in hopefully next Tuesday, and if not before, we'll see you online away. Take care, go to bed, stay up late, whatever. But goodbye.